Good morning or good evening on the line. We'll get started in another 1 or 2 minutes. Thanks for tuning in a little early. So good evening, everyone who's tuned in. Thank you for being here with us. We can go ahead and get started because we have a full slate of presenters and many interesting topics this morning. Thank you for coming to the third of the 3-part webinar series on VODAN Africa. And while we are concerned and worried about the challenge that lies ahead of us with COVID, we are reminded that it has brought us all together and reminded us of the common thread that binds us, our humanity. And so thank you for being here together and looking at the role of data and data stewardship and data science and how that is going to help us all fight this challenge ahead of us, as well as build infrastructure, especially in Africa, that will leave us well poised to fight further challenges in the future. With that, I'd like to turn it over to Francisca Oladipo, who is the Executive Director and Executive Coordinator of VODAN Africa.
Yeah, thank you, Christine. Okay, so I'll say good morning to you in California. It's actually good evening here from Kampala and to the rest of the world and the rest of Africa, I'm sorry. So I would like to welcome everyone to this series again. It's been an interesting and exciting time since the 7th of May when we started the SDS VODAN African webinar series. Thank you so much, Christine, for hosting us, and it's really been very beautiful experience for everyone. So I'm going to be giving a brief introduction because we have a lot of speakers today from our partner countries. I'll talk about the VODAN project and then the VODAN Africa. I'm going to spend more time on that and then introduce our speakers from Tunisia while we connect the speakers from the other countries. So the Virus Outbreak Data Network is an implementation of the GoFair Foundation with some of the data partners. And it's mainly like to leverage on the available expertise to build a global and open data on COVID-19, especially data that are findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. So there has been several outbreaks in the past, but just for some reasons, there has not really been conscious effort to prepare the data in the right format. And then there has also been a question of ownership. Every country, they're so protective, they're so worried about what happens to their data if they release them into the hands of third-party organizations. So, but with FAIR, data remains under the governance and the ownership of wherever they are sourced from. Computer algorithms will simply just go there, fetch the data, and then analyze, make the necessary deductions, and they're just left in their own residency or in their own, wherever they are. For the Virus Outbreak Data Network, it's an African project. In March, some universities, ministries of health, and then researchers from Europe, they came together and joined the VODAN network and formed the VODAN African network, effectively providing African expertise into the fight against COVID-19. There has been so much talked about vaccines for the COVID-19. okay, what happens when everyone gets vaccinated against COVID-19 and a cure is eventually found, everyone is okay, all the lockdowns are eased, and then we all move on with our lives. Somewhere down the line, we have another set of outbreak, now not COVID-19. Would it not be fine to take the lessons from COVID-19 into combating this future outbreak? That is one of the reasons for the formation of VODAN Africa. So supported by our European partners, we have so far active partners in 6 countries: Uganda, Zimbabwe, Kenya, Ethiopia, Nigeria, and Tunisia. Ministries of health, universities, and health regulatory agencies in these countries have come together to team up and form the African Partnership for combating COVID-19 with fair data and then beyond COVID-19. So we're already looking beyond COVID-19, looking into primary health care, looking into health accessibility for those who have no access to even health care in the first place. We have partners from Europe who have provided support for these projects. The funding is provided by the Philips Foundation. We have the Go Fair Foundation who has been helping with the technical implementation. And of course, we have enjoyed support from the universities of Leiden and Tilburg through their professors and graduate students who have continued to provide technical support. Specifically, we have a Professor Miriam who has been coordinated this project, and she's been all over the place getting us all the support, helping to build the network of universities. She's been leveraging on our own past contacts to bring a lot of people to the table. So far with VODAN Africa, we've been doing well and we should be proud of ourselves. When we started, a lot of the data stewards actually had no idea of what it's all about. I keep on getting questions like, all these things we're learning, what are we going to do with it? But by this time today, now Africa has built a capacity of a kind of a knowledge ecosystem that can help even other regions in the world in the implementation of the FAIR principle on data in healthcare data. And of course, we have had the first metadata for machines workshop in the context of COVID-19 happening in Africa. We have a body of data stewardship who have been involved in training of trainers who can now go out and implement the principle of FAIR on any kind of health data elsewhere. In Uganda, we have 16, Zimbabwe 2, in Kenya, 6 data stewards. Ethiopia has 4, Nigeria has 5 as at the last count, and Tunisia is manned by 2 very senior experts, Morgan and then Dr. Miriam. So I would like to welcome everyone again and thank you for your support and for being part of this project. We still have so many requests for partnership. I was on a call with the Honorable Julia Castle, the former minister in Liberia. She's also trying to bring in the Liberia team. We've had requests from South Africa and Rwanda. After the first proof of concept, we'll be able to now go out and build data points around the COVID-19 and of course around different kinds of healthcare data in Africa. And definitely, Africa is now on the map as it regards to finding solutions to the COVID-19. Today, we will be hearing from 2 country cohorts. Last week, we've had the Kenya and Ethiopia present their own perspective, their initiative, the perspective as regards to COVID-19 and VODAN. And today we shall be listening to the teams from Tunisia and Zimbabwe. We look at what is happening in the country as regards the COVID-19 pandemic and how VODAN Africa has come in and what VODAN Africa can do in those countries. In Tunisia specifically, if you go to the next slide, yes, we have Dr. Miriam Gadolu, a medical doctor and also a professor at the College of Medicine, University de Sus, one of our partner universities. She's a member of the Learning and Digital Innovation Unit and the Project Management Office. She holds MPS degrees in Quality of Healthcare and Management of Health Services, and also in Medical Informatics from the same university. Professor Hassan Bobakri is also a member of the Tunisia team for VODAN Africa. She's a professor of geography and migration studies at the University of Sus in Tunisia. She's also an associate professor at the University of Sfax. He has expertise in themes from irregular migration, asylum, and country migration policies in North Africa and the neighboring countries. He was the coordinator for Tunisia's research on how Tunisia hosted migrants who fled Libya since 2011. Morgan has done so much for this project. Morgan has been the one translating a lot of our materials to French for free so that our French readers and French audience can follow. She's a freelance researcher and journalist based in Tunisia. She's also one of the contributions from Tilburg University as part of our partnership. She works with Professor Hassan and Dr. Miriam, and they're all working on implementing VODAN at the University of Sousse. Morgan is researching on the incidence of COVID-19 and movements among migrants, refugees, and asylum seekers in the central Mediterranean region. And she will link the data she collects to VODAN. In addition to the country cohorts, today we shall be hearing from the chairman of the Implementation Network for VODAN Africa, Dr. Mohamed Mpeza Mihiko, the Vice Chancellor of Kampala International University. He's going to be closing this event and is going to be addressing the diversity question on why universities took interest in FAIR, why it is important that Africa be a part of this network, and why actually at this time, Africa is leading in the implementation of FAIR principles as it concerns the COVID-19 and beyond. If you move to the next slide, Christine. Yes, so I'm going to hand over to the team from Tunisia, Morgan, Professor Mariam, and Professor Boubakri to please go ahead with their presentation. So who is going to start? Okay. Dr. Miriam will be talking about the Tunisia's role in training of medical capacities for the African continent and the experience in fighting the COVID-19. Professor Boubakri will take the next point of detecting COVID-19 among mobile vulnerable groups. Those are the migrants and refugees. And then what are the responses of the Tunisian government to the needs of migrants in Tunisia? While Morgan continues to talk about Tunisians' role with respect to their neighborhood with Libya, and then what are the collaborations with neighboring Europe to fight the COVID-19? And finally, Dr. Miriam will be concluding their talk, the country presentation, with how VODAN Africa responds to these challenges. Dr. Miriam, please.
Okay. Good evening, everyone, and thank you, Mrs. Francesca. In the beginning, I'd like to thank all the members of VODAN Africa team to give us the opportunity to share the Tunisian experience in fighting the challenges related to COVID-19 pandemic in general, and especially among some vulnerable groups. So I will start by presenting the Tunisian role in training capacities in general for the African continent and then for medical ones. Next slide, okay. Foreign students are admitted to Tunisian public universities according to quota and offers agreed with their country of origin. As we can see, the statistics presented by the Tunisia Africa Empowerment Forum, foreign students make up 2.5 of the total student population. And among this proportion,
oh, Dr. Miriam, I think we've lost your audio.
Let's see on the.
Miriam.
Trying to find her if she's still here.
Well, thank you everyone for your patience while we bring Dr. Miriam back or switch over to perhaps one of her colleagues would like to continue. This has been a challenge for many of the countries on this webinar series, but of course it is not just Africa who is having connectivity problems all over the world with more people saturated on lines that were only meant for home use. We're seeing this also in the US, and so we'll just take a moment to breathe and be patient. So has Dr. Miriam joined us, or Hassan, would you like to?
Hello everybody, and thank you for your invitation, and we are really glad to join you and to work with our all of our partners. I will speak till the back of Miriam, when she has when she will have the audio, I can leave and she will continue. So just to say that from some years, since 5 or 10 years, Tunisia is was coming the big country of foreign students, mostly and mainly from from sub-Saharan countries, African countries, and as you look in on the slide, about 3/4 of the three or four of the foreign students are from Africa, and 30% are from sub-Saharan Africa. In the private universities, they are about 100. Full of them are from sub-Saharan Africa, and in the public university, on a total of 260 students, you have 6,000 foreigners, and about 4,000 from the sub-Saharan countries. So the next one, please. About the Tunisia role in training capacity for the African continent. Tunisia, the intervention, yes, I know, yes, so I think that Miriam can continue. Miriam? She's here. She's back.
Okay, let me see. Yeah, she's back. I think she's trying to get her audio together. I can see her now.
Miriam?
Yes, and she's not muted.
Yeah, she's not muted. I think the audio is not connected.
So, okay. So I will continue.
Please, yes.
Yes, I will continue till be sure that Miriam is back. So as I said, the private sector is very active in the in this dynamic of the academic and higher education presence of students from sub-Saharan country in Tunisia, and you have the Tunisia Africa Business Council launched a new initiative called Tunisian African Employment Forum with objectives, strategic objectives in order to promote the Tunisian destination for this education, and in general for the vocational training for African students and with medical staff. And in this case, there is a long and large Tunisian experience in the cooperation, medical cooperation, mainly with African countries, with Djibouti, and mostly with the French-speaking countries in Africa, in West Africa mainly. And yes, you can go to the other about the training of the medical capacity of African country in Tunisia. We can say that Tunisian healthcare system and medical education have a very good international reputation in many regions in sub-Saharan countries and in Europe. And Tunisia, the education budget for Tunisia, for example, is about 30% of the whole budget of the state, and the objective and the goals were every time were to satisfy the health needs and to the country and the population. And as I said, there is a lot of students from African countries, from Mauritania, from Morocco, who are studying in medical studies and in paramedical studies in Tunisia. And I think that Tunisia is now planning an ambitious program to attract more students from sub-Saharan countries in the public university, not only in the private sector of higher education, but also there is a program which will be was launched last year in order to attract about 10,000 students from sub-Saharan countries. Yes. Here you have some examples of the cooperation between the cooperation between Tunisia and African countries for the training of medical capacity, and many initiatives of training exchanges between Tunisia and several African countries with several projects, as you look on the slide. Healthcare provided from French-speaking African countries, as I said, and you have here some ones of Université Publique du Maghreb at the level in the Maghreb area, but also with other universities in cardiovascular specialty, workshops and training session, etc. I hope that
Can you
Mariam, Morgan, you can continue, Mariam.
I'm
Morgan?
here. Can you hear me?
Yes, Mariam. Okay.
Thanks,
Okay.
Professor Hassan, and I'm very, very sorry for this trouble. So I will continue with the experience of Tunisia to fight COVID-19. Next slide, please. So in general, the Tunisian response to this epidemic has been swift and progressive, despite resource limitation. Our response was conducted mainly by the Ministry of Health with the collaboration of the National Observatory of New and Emerging Disease. In fact, the first phase of managing the COVID-19 pandemic threat in Tunisia aimed to achieve the general objective of our strategy, which is to curb the spread of the virus within the population in order to avoid overshooting the response capacity of the health system. More recently, we passed to the second phase, which arise new challenges, especially to avoid the rebound of the epidemic. Next slide, please. In fact, to achieve these goals, the Tunisian strategy response was based on 5 principles, which were called the 5 early. The first one was the early detection of cases, which in fact, we indicate the PCR test, especially for suspected or probable cases, or as part of the contact tracing. Then the second point was the early declaration of cases, which were confirmed by the test laboratory. And then we will publish every day the new situation, epidemic situation in the site of the Ministry of Health. The third point was the initial early investigation and the contact tracing. The fourth one was the early isolation of all cases. And the last one was the treatment and early management of patients with the infection. These principles were expressed through public health measures, which were launched from the beginning of the epidemic in the world. The next slide. Here we can see the chronological overview of all measures introduced throughout the country. In fact, in January 28, we started by the screening in all entry points and the indication of self-isolation for 14 days for all returnees. Then on March 12th, and especially after the declaration of the first case of COVID-19, which were imported cases from Italy, Tunisia proceeded to the closure of all maritime borders and the suspension of airlines. Then on March 14th, Tunisia closed all schools and universities and banned all rallies. On March 22nd, we declared the general confinement and we placed all returnees in a dedicated location for isolation during the quarantine period. According to all these measures and action, the epidemiological situation was established. That's why since May 4, we passed to a new phase, which is the targeted confinement. In global, we have to emphasize a fact that despite the imposed and the strong action, the government has received no pushback from its citizens, even from some communities, which were particularly some more susceptible to economic shock resulting from stay-at-home or lockdowns. That's why these measures have led to the current epidemiological situation. So by the 19th May, we account a total of 1,043 confirmed cases with 46 deaths. Next slide, please. And as we can see in these curves, we note the decrease of the number of active cases and the increase of the recovered ones. At final, the next one. Please, Christy. I have to mention an important indicator of the evolution of the disease transmission, which is the number or the reproduction number. By 22nd March, this indicator became less than 1 in Tunisia, and this fact highlights the decline of the disease transmission. However, we have to still be prudent, especially with the recovery and with the targeted confinement. So I will give the floor to Professor Hassan to continue the next session.
Yes, thank you, Mariam. So as you see, we divided the presentation between our three, and me. I will focus on the migration context in Tunisia and its links and its relation with the COVID-19 and how Tunisia, the authority, the international organization settled in Tunisia, the NGO, the civil society organization, and the community, the population has responded to the pandemic. So you can pass to the. So about the Tunisia migration context, the first point to underline is, of course, that Tunisia is I don't know if you see here on the map, the closest African third country to Italy, and Italy, which is the first Euro-Mediterranean destination country for North and Sub-Saharan African migrants. And Lampedusa is 140 kilometers far from the Tunisian east coast. Here, Lampedusa is about here. If you, I don't know if you see that on the screen. And yes, here, below Lampedusa is here. Lampedusa is where is the between Tunisia and the Mediterranean, the M of Mediterranean here. Yes, here is Lampedusa, and the 145 kilometers from the northeast coast of Italy, that what we call here the Canal of Sicilia. You know that in last years, between the migration crisis since 2014, the Central Mediterranean flags from Tunisia and mainly from Libya, they represented about 30 or 40% of the whole arrival in Europe from the third countries, from Turkey and from Africa, Morocco, Tunisia, and Libya. The slide after, please. And the second point, which will be presented by Morgan, but it's important to focus on, is that Tunisia is also not the country near Italy, but also the neighboring country of Libya, where since 2011, war, violence, and migrants, human rights abuses are the daily dangers and risks faced by migrant workers, and the majority of them are sub-Saharan. And I think that you heard about the cruelty of the situation in Libya, and more than that, the information about the slave market, Libya as a slave market for sub-Saharan migrants. And one of the option among other for migrants, sub-Saharan migrants who are facing these risks is to flee to Tunisia, and that's we will Morgan will tell you about this. The slide after, please. So for me, why is important for Tunisia the situation and the context, the Tunisian context, why is important for this? Because Tunisia has a multifunctional migration in migration role. So it's a department country, and there is about 150 million who Tunisian live abroad, and it's second transit migration country for northern and mainly for sub-Saharan African undocumented migrants looking to reach the European shore. Third function and role of Tunisia is it's an immigrant country, an immigration country for rich European businessmen and retirees, and for northern and mainly sub-Saharan migrant workers, which they want now to stay in Tunisia. And about the foreigner population, it's about 60,000, and you have about 10,000 foreign students in the public and private university, as said by Mariam. And about the worker, it's about 10,000 also who are women and documented and informed workers. And not forget the Libyan citizens who are in Tunisia. There is a huge and a big mobility and circulation between the both countries, and their situation, their study is between tourists, migrants, refugees, study, and because the fact of the Libyan conflict. After, the response. So the question is how Tunisia dealt with COVID-19. There is three categories of stakeholder. You have the authorities, you have the Tunisian and international civil society organization, and you have the regional organizations such as European Union and African Union, and of course, as I said, the local population. The slide after. So at the level of the authority, there is coordination meetings and official declaration between the concerned ministries, the Ministry of Human Rights and Relation with Constitutional Authority and Civil Society, the Ministry of Interior, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the Ministry of Social Affairs, and of course, the Ministry of Higher Education. And the Ministry of Interior will they said that they will not pay attention to the administrative situation of foreigners in Tunisia until the end of the corona crisis. So no undocumented migrant can be touched or can affected by it's by his administrative situation. And I think for this side of for this subject, they are really quiet. Another thing that the Ministry of Interior called the owner to be flexible with foreign tenants, which they give houses and shelter to the migrants. And of course, Tunisia, the Ministry of Interior said that he will not apply fines, delay for irregular stay, and he considered that the visa and the stay of the foreigner and mainly for African migrants, they are open till the end of the pandemic. After. From the side of the Ministry of Higher Education, they provided accommodation in the university city, in the university campus, to the foreign students who cannot reach their families or their countries of origin with the lockdown in Tunisia. So, because all the campus and university are closed, but they opened this university for the accommodation for the foreign students and mainly for sub-Saharan students in Tunisia. And migrants are considered in Tunisia as vulnerable groups, such as the Tunisian. There is no difference in the responses given and in the aids and the assistance given to the vulnerable groups in Tunisia. There is no discrimination, no difference, and therefore they can receive, and they receive aid and support from the Tunisian Union of Social Solidarity and from a whole a big number of associations. The slide after, please. So, for example, here at the level, even at the regional level of the Tunisian government and Tunisian authority, in the governor of Kassim, it's in the inland, in the countryside of Tunisia. They supported, for example, Ivorian student in Spetla. It's in the west, near the border of Algeria. After. We stay with the Tunisian authority, but the local authority, I mean municipality, and municipality have also launched their support to sub-Saharan migrants and students. You have the municipality of Sousse, the municipality of Sfax, municipality of Marsaklo, Tunisia, the municipality of Tunis, and here you have an example of the minutes of the meeting held in the municipality of Sousse on 22 of April, last 22 of April, to prepare a plan of social aid to the migrants and refugees living in the city of Sousse. After, at the level of the Tunisian civil society organization, they worked on two levels: support and assistance to migrants, mainly sub-Saharan, and called to Tunisian authority for regulating the sub-Saharan migrant situation in Tunisia. They worked on these two ways in these two raids. After, so there is a solidarity chain which have been set up to respond to the migrant needs, and you have Tunisian international NGOs, individuals have responded to the distress calls launched by migrants on social media, on Facebook mainly. And there is more than 20 NGOs who were and still are mobilized to respond to the migrants' needs in these weeks, in these current weeks. Yes, please. And here you have some example of all over across the country to the territoire. You have the south, you have the center, you have the north, and here this network has mapped solidarity initiative for migrants over all Tunisia, SFACs in the municipality, in the cities, and in the big areas. And this action were coordinated by the organization Tunisia d'Asile, the home of law and migration in Tunisia. You have an African sub-Saharan organization, and the Tunisian Council for Refugee and Migrants. After, at the second level, when I said they called the Tunisian government to regulate migration, there was a call, and after that meeting with the representative of Tunisian organization, with the Ministry of Human Rights and Relation with the Constitutional Authority and Civil Society, to regulate the situation of sub-Saharan migrants in Tunisia. And there were 58 representatives of Tunisian organization and association who are in this action. And now the ministry is working with the government in order to find the way to respond to this request of the civil society organization. After, so now is Morgan, Tunisia role as a neighboring country. Morgan.
Thank you very much, Hassan. Thank you very much, Mariam. Thank you very much, Christine and Francisca, and all of you for assisting, for following this webinar. So, as Professor Boubakri explained, Tunisia is, you still hear me now?
Yes, perfect.
Okay, thank you. So Tunisia is a neighbor country of Libya, which make the situation of migrants a little bit complicated. So if you go to the next slide, on this map, you can see the current situation of Libya, which is at war since the Second War of Libya started in 2014. So in green is the part that are controlled by Tuareg and Tubut tribes. In red are the part controlled by Marshal Khalifa Haftar, and in blue is the part controlled by the government, the GNA, which is considered as legitimate by the international community. So this is a map from our website who give updates every day from Libya. So everywhere that you see the little bonds is like the last attacks that occurred. So this week was an important news from Libya. There is a lot of things happening nowadays in Libya. Marshal Haftar lost Al-Watiya military base, which is at 140 kilometers from Tripoli. So we also see that the conflict is starting to get closer and closer to the Tunisia's border. So what is exactly the impact on this conflict on Tunisia? Of course, it is a economic impact, because a lot of people from Tunisia were working in Libya because there is a lot of opportunity to work in Libya. So they had to come back. Some of them are still over there. It's also, of course, a security issue. Tunisia fears for terrorism, mercenaries, and as I said, the fact that the conflict is getting closer to the border. So the message from the presidency to all the stakeholders in the conflict is that the situation in Libya threatens national security, but it also insists on the fact that the solution must be a Libyan solution. So the president, Kais Saied, is not in favor of foreign intervention in Libya. At least this is the official message. He also and he also he follows the international community, which means that he recognizes the GNA, which is based in Tripoli, as the leader of Libya. Kais Saied arrived at power in October, and he has settled a working group on the situation of Libya. That working group is responsible to bring responses in case of emergency. And in Tunisia, nowadays, no other institution than this working group is authorized to interfere on this topic. So if we go to the next slide, I will more talk about migration between Tunisia and Libya. So as Mariam said at the beginning of the presentation, on the 16th March, Tunisia closed its border to impeach the propagation of COVID-19, which means also the border between Libya and Tunisia. And 20,000 Tunisian workers were stuck in Libya, also being afraid because the conflict is starting to arrive. Haftar is leading operation, and Tunisians are considered as backing the GNA, so they are not in a safe situation. On the 20th of April, if you see, there are a lot of pictures on Twitter, and this is one of the pictures that I took to illustrate it. 700 Tunisian people forced the border office between Tunisia and Libya in Ras Jedir, and we still don't really know what exactly happened, but according to several sources, they forced the gates, giving them access to 2 kilometers of no man's land, and they were received after by the Tunisian authorities. It is always hard for Tunisia when so many people are arriving from Libya because they fear that there are terrorists maybe between them, and there were also the sanitary issue. So they were interrogated and put in quarantine, but there is a lot of very few information on this topic. So this is about the Tunisians that are stuck in Libya. There are also the sub-Saharan people or East African people that are also stuck in Libya. Nowadays, we know that the border with Tunisia, Algeria, Niger, Sudan, Chad, and Egypt are closed in Libya. So there are fewer migrants arriving in Libya with the objective to take the boats, maybe to go to Europe. So also because it is Ramadan nowadays, because the prices for ship are less expensive, there are a lot of boats that are still leaving despite the situation of COVID-19. A lot of boats are still leaving to Europe, and especially this week, it's a really dangerous situation for a lot of migrants who are at this moment on the sea trying to reach Europe, because they want to reach Europe before Eid, because during Ramadan there are less control, because the Coast Guards, the Libyan Coast Guards are fasting, so there is less control on the sea. We have, for the moment, no information and not heard about migrants that are still crossing the border terrestrial border, the border by foot between Tunisia and Libya. So nowadays, as always actually, but even more nowadays, migrants are still in a very vulnerable situation in Libya. They have no access to hospital because they are not recognized. Also, a lot of hospitals are bombed in Libya, so there is a very few access. They are chased away by smugglers. Sometimes smugglers put everybody away, even if the people have already paid for the journey, like you have paid $2,000 US for crossing Europe, and after you are chased away saying, oh no, you have Corona, go away, go away. There is also a lot, like hundreds of people who were left in the desert in Sudan and in Niger. And we still don't really know what happened to those people because they were immediately set in quarantine by the authorities of Niger and Sudan. And this quarantine actually is now, I don't know, maybe they are released now, but I checked on Monday and it was more than 1 month that they were in quarantine and nobody had access to them. So we don't know why they are left at the borders. There are also people who disappear. So this week, for instance, it's just an incident. 200 people from Eritrea and Somalia disappeared overnight from Zarwa detention center. They are, we don't know, maybe they escaped, maybe they were sold, maybe they were forced to fight with the militias, but the situation is still that there is very few information about what is happening to those vulnerable people, and they are, as always, marginalized, and the fact that those people are traveling, the diseases like Corona is another reason for marginalizing them. Like a few days ago, maybe now 10 days ago, there is one boat that arrived in Tunisia with 50 Eritrean and Somalis. They had departed from Zwara and they arrived in Sfax and they are now in quarantine. For what I know now, it is the only boat that has arrived nowadays in Tunisia. A lot of boats are usually arriving in Tunisia because people lose their way or such situation. So if we go to the next slide. Yeah, so now I'm going to talk to you about the collaboration between Tunisia and Europe. So if we go to the next slide. Among the different things that are done in the cooperation between Tunisia and Europe, we decided here to talk about this. I think it's 600. I have to check this number, but I think it's not 6,000.
No, 600.
It's 600 millions who were provided by European Union to Tunisia in the form of loan of highly favorable terms to help Tunisia to deal with the economic crisis that is going to follow the COVID-19. We decide here also to talk about what is done by the international organization because a part of their budget is from European Union. So IOM, which is the International Organization for Migration, helped migrants in the south of Libya, no, in the south of Tunisia, sorry. And they provide them voucher, food and hygiene kits. I have talked today with them and they said that they distributed voucher to 700 migrants in this area at the south of Tunisia, the area of Medellin. I had one migrant in Tunis who said that he had never received any support and that Corona is good because for the first time people bring him food. But this is So there are a lot of people who are there, okay, now people are starting to help us, but still it is a really, really hard situation for a lot of Tunisian people and also for migrants, because they lost their access to a job and they don't have, compared to the Tunisian, they don't have a family that can help them over here or a community that can support them, because everybody in the community is in the same situation. Everybody has lost his job. UNHCR and CTR is the Centre Tunisien pour les Réfugiés. They distribute also hygiene kits in the south of Tunisia. And yeah, as I said, there is still a lot to do. And those actions comes to a lot of operation led by the Tunisian civil society, as Hassan has explained to you. And I think we can follow with Mariam.
Okay, thank you, Morgan. So in this last section, we will try to respond to the question how VODAN respond to these challenges from the side of health, principally. But before, I have to mention that the Tunisian health system is in a current reform, and this later can't be achieved without the rise of the digital health. For this, a national strategic plan was elaborated, which called Tunisia Digital 2020. And this plan consisted on different dimensions, such as hospital information systems. When we look now, please, the slide, Christine. When we look now to the data and the information related to COVID-19 pandemic in Tunisia, we can note that we are faced to mainly three problems. The first one is a problem related to interoperability. In fact, we have several sources and formats of data related to COVID-19, and especially data related to migrants and refugees. The second problem is the problem of the use of data. In fact, despite of the existence of some regional initiative to gather all information in a unique database or registry, such as the example of the platform COVID-19 tunis.com, but few people know about the existence of this platform and how to access to it. So we have limited users of this platform. The third point, as you know that the most common way to share scientific knowledge is the academic publications, but this process can be long and labor. So we can face to a problem for accessibility to data. So for these different problems, the application of FAIR or VODAN principles for data from COVID-19 in Tunisia will play an indispensable role, and we have to use the opportunity presented by this project to escape these problems. So thank you for attention, and we will be ready to respond to all the questions.
Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you so much. That was a very, very interesting and comprehensive look at what is going on in Tunisia. We thank you so much to the speakers for giving us all of the different things to consider. And now, Francesca, I turn it back to you to introduce our next speaker. And oh, and I wanted to also say we will hold questions at the very end. Time allowing, speakers and people who ask questions can stay on, and that will come after VC Mepeza's closing remarks.
Thank you, Christine. Next, we hear from our team in Zimbabwe. We have Dr. Albert Mulingwa, who is a medical doctor and is in charge of the digital health and working hard on the COVID-19 pandemic in Zimbabwe. And of course, we have Kuda Kwashe from the Great Zimbabwe University, one of our partner universities on the VODAN Africa project. I'll have to apologize for Kuda. He has been very active and working so hard on building the fair data points at the Great Zimbabwe University, and also working under the supervision of the Ministry of Health from Dr. Albert. Kuda has been unwell, so Dr. Albert Mulingwa will be speaking for Team Zimbabwe at this evening's webinar. Dr. Albert, please.
Thank you very much for this opportunity, and let me also apologize. We really have been up and down on the ground in the office. We are on the ground. We are on the front line with the epidemic. I also did not manage to share with you. My slides are in good time. I will share with the team a presentation, but for now, allow me to just speak from my notes. My first comment to the team is to let everyone know that our Go Fair team in Zimbabwe, our Go Fair in Zimbabwe is not yet that fully operational or satisfactorily operational as we would want it to be. The main reasons there would be we are still at a stage where we need to have effective stakeholder engagement and have respective leadership buy-in. And then also from then we would have a country plan which is more contextualized, locally driven, and would address, of course, the areas that we have been talking about, data governance, sovereignty, and management. Allow me then to move on to share with you my presentation with regards to our response to COVID-19, but with a bias to ICT and data-driven interventions. As you note, I work within the Ministry of Health and Childcare Zimbabwe. I work in the HIV department. The response to COVID, I will share with you in my presentation how our Ministry of Health systems are structured so that you understand which department is actually working on this. But you might note that in my presentation, I might make reference here and there to the community of people living with HIV and how they are affected in this particular COVID era, this is what I deal with every day. The outline of my presentation, I'll start by giving you the background of the Ministry of Health systems that we have in place that will be responsible for the COVID response. And then next, I would spend 3 minutes or so on the main challenges, opportunities that we are seeing that are ICT and data related again, data interventions related again. And then my third set of notes are related to the priority areas that we, as a country, we feel we need to focus on as we speak about ICT or data related issues in this response. So our Ministry of Health in Zimbabwe is, let me start by saying this is one of the positive thing that we can share as Zimbabwe, to say we have in place systems and structures have been in place and are in place to deal with emergencies or to deal with such pandemics that we as the COVID-19. So we do have from the National Office directorates. There are mainly three principal directorates in our ministry: the preventive directorate, the curative directorate, and also the directorate that deals with policy and planning. All these departments are involved in the national response, and they form or they are represented in the national task force that is responding to COVID. Under the principal directorates, we have several directorates or directors that are responsible for different interventions, but mainly I'll speak to the Directorate of Disease Control, Epidemiology and Disease Control, which is the one responsible for dealing with such pandemics as the COVID pandemic. And this is taking lead within the ministry in the response. And then, of course, we do have other departments that will be affected. For example, with HIV and other infectious diseases, and with other departments dealing with reproductive health. That would include sexual health and reproductive health issues. Then other non-communicable diseases that include mental health, which is also a major issue that needs to be dealt with in this era that we are seeing on the ground. That's from the national level. We do have systems that we put in place at provincial level and sub-national levels, with again the Ministry of Health taking lead in all interventions that will be happening health related. Of course, working with our different supporting partners and implementing partners in the respective provinces. I should mention that we do work, we have our response as a multi-level, multi-stakeholder, and also multidisciplinary response, bringing together all departments that are relevant to the response. Let me mention specifically that related to ICT, we do have within the ministry a department that is responsible for digital health, with a deputy director leading, deputy director for ICT sitting within the Ministry of Health. So that's quite a strong leadership that we have, that we use in such cases. Now, from the national level down to the provincial level, we also have ICT personnel. At provincial level, we do have data experts, we have ICT experts, and also monitoring and evaluation experts. These are the key cadres that I would say drive the ICT-based interventions at sub-national levels. But these are part of the establishment within the ministry. And we also have, I should mention, we have a very good relationship as ministry with our partners that support us. And we also note that within the partners and structures of our partners, we do have cadres specifically responsible for ICT and data management. With that background, let me just highlight at high level the key or areas in which we see main challenges vis-a-vis. Also, I usually like to call challenges opportunities for improvement in our interventions that I see. One, as a country in resource limited settings, infrastructure is one key area that we are finding ourselves quite challenged to establish an infrastructure of ICT that would ensure that all our ICT-based interventions at all levels run smoothly. We do have electronic systems like our electronic health record system. We do have like specifically for HIV, the electronic patient monitoring system, and also other systems supporting other health systems, strengthening interventions we have. Like, for example, our lab systems have an electronic system that they use. Our pharmacy or our pharmaceutical side, they also have their pharmaceutical or logistics information system, that is also ICT based to deal with issues of logistics and medicines and other supplies. Next, in terms of our HR capacity, in terms of numbers, and also in terms of skills and knowledge at the levels where we need them to be working or applying their knowledge and skills in ICT and data management. Next is a gap that we also see in collaborations. We feel we can do more in terms of collaborations that can help us in our ICT-based interventions. I usually like to use this triangle of working with the government, working with our funding partners, and working with our implementing partners, bringing in together also the academia. That kind of arrangement should always exist, and we feel that we can do more in terms of collaborating, and we should not leave the community, the civil society, and other locally driven efforts that will then be supported by those that are capacitated. But we should find this in collaborations, and I think ICT in this era can also can come in there. The last thing that I want to comment is a challenge or an opportunity, again, is when it comes to coordination of efforts by the various stakeholders. Again, you know, in our context, we were quite much used to face-to-face meetings and workshops and so forth. But now we need to rethink how to do things to move our programs in the era where we have to observe social distancing and other measures that have been put in place in response for COVID. Sorry, I'm going to be rushing just to make sure that I'm also within the time allocated. I need to share with you some of the priority areas that we have put in place through our consultative processes to save the country in this COVID era. When it comes to ICT, where can ICT come in? This may not be an exhaustive list, but we continue to learn daily, and we continue to adjust and also ensure that we are responsive to the pandemic as we progress. Priority area number one, we feel we need to make use of ICT in our information dissemination. It's very key in our context to make sure that the right information reaches the intended communities, and that we feel that ICT can really come in there. The next area would speak to the capacity building that I spoke to earlier. So our training, our mentorship. We feel we have room there for ICT intervention. We feel that is a priority area as we face new conditions, new challenges that will need our healthcare workers to be capacitated to provide the services that they need to provide. Then, of course, as we implement our programs, monitoring and support and supervision also that have originally been done or traditionally been done physically, we need to be devising ways of how we can ensure that we monitor our program implementation, we support and supervise our implementers on the ground, and coming also with monitoring and evaluation of our program implementation is this key component of research. We believe we need to be learning as we implement, operations research is key for us to learn how we can continuously improve our programming with a good evidence base. Then, of course, leadership and program management in this era. Again, ICT will go a long way in seeing us doing this in a different way from the usual way that we've been doing things. And probably in the same vein, resource mobilization in this context, or in our context of resource limited settings. ICT can come in there, and also networking closely related to collaboration that I spoke to earlier. I think trying to squeeze my major points in the 10 minutes that I was given. I have shared with you what I feel are key areas that we would want to share as a country. Allow me to just conclude by just sharing with you just a bit of our progress, or just a bit of a picture of the what we are dealing with. We also have our department dealing with the COVID response, giving us updates daily of the burden that we are looking at as a country. Today, 2020, we have an accumulated number of cases coming to of confirmed cases coming to 4, and then we have 18 cases that have recovered from the committed confirmed cases. And this is from our official site as of 21 May. Allow me to end here for now and probably address any other remaining issues from as I respond to any comments that will come through, or clarification that you may need. Thank you.
Thank you so much,
Over.
Dr. Albert. That was we really appreciate you taking the time, especially from the front lines and everything else that you have going on. And I think it, you know, really shows in your actions how important you think data is to this overall fight and challenge. And so thank you so much for your time. Francesca, if I could ask you to introduce Eric.
Yes, thank you, Christine. Our next is Dr. Eric Schultz. I'm sure all the data stewards and the members of the technical team of VODAN Africa are already excited. And I also want to thank the participants, everyone else, for your patience and participation, but I want to kind of stimulate you to listen to Dr. Eric's presentation, because it's going to be showing you how far we have come. And I've just seen a very interesting picture of comparison between Europe and Africa. So I promise you it's going to be a very, very interesting and exciting talk. Dr. Eric is the International Science Coordinator at the Go Fair International Support and Coordination Office, and he guides the fair implementation strategies at the Dutch Tech Center for Life Sciences. He's also a member of the Leiden Center for Data Science, and he has been an incredible support to the VODAN Africa project. He's actually our teacher. Every Tuesday, we are with Eric, and he's so patient. It's so, when we started, it was like the data stewards had no direction, but it was Eric, through his patience and methodologies, that has been able to bring everybody together. And then all the countries are almost at par. We're almost at the same level in terms of the fair data points and the machine-for-machine metadata specification for the VODAN Africa COVID-19 project. So I give the floor to Eric for his presentation.
Hey, Francesca, thank you very much for that super kind introduction. You know, I am so honored to be, you know, in this project, because, you know, everyone here seems to be involved in such important activities. And for everyone then to find some kind of, you know, extra time and energy to devote to something very cutting edge like fair data, and trying to implement, be among the first to really do a large scale implementation of fair data. It's really an honor to be here. And so, you know, as hard as you will all work, I will promise to also work just as well. So, so thank you, Francesca, for the introduction, and thank you, Christine, for the invitation to be here today. And next slide. What I would like to do is just maybe go back, take one step back, and try to reorientate to a context and a perspective for this VODAN project. This is a graph that I keep attention to. I use it in presentations because it really provides, you know, the context for the circumstance that we're all working together right now. This is the total coronavirus cases that have been detected over time. And, you know, the numbers here, 100,000, 200,000, and 300,000 are representing deaths associated with the COVID-19 disease. In the next slide. Before there was even an awareness kind of surfacing in the, you know, the mainstream media, I had already been contacted as a coordinator at the Go Fair office by 3 groups. This is by February 20 or so, that were requesting some kind of coordination because they had already detected that COVID could be an epidemic, if not a pandemic, and they had already been conceiving fair implementations to deal with this problem. And so these were different days, right? This is, you know, February 21 seems like a long time ago now. It was a different world. And the MIDAS project from the US, which is a disease, infectious disease modeling project funded by the NIH. They were wanting to run a metadata for machine workshop on related COVID data sets. Then a local, or I'll say a Dutch funding agency, ZoneMV, in cooperation with the Glopid R group, we're also talking about running metadata for machine workshops and attempts and opportunities to launch fair data for the COVID disease. And then finally, Castor, which is a Dutch company, came to me and said, we've already launched a fair data point. You know, even though we are a company, we would like this to be free and open for academic use. And we will be posting case reports on the Castor fair data point. And so by February 21, there was already a conversation internally at the Go Fair office. And the next slide. And that conversation came to a peak, ironically enough, when I was at a meeting run by the San Diego Supercomputing Center. This meeting was held in Atlanta on February 25th, 26th. And internally in the Go Fair office, we had made the decision that it was time to commit to the verification of COVID-related data. Next slide. Within about 3 weeks, we had launched then the Virus Outbreak Data Network at the Go Fair organization. So we have about 20 or 30, depending how you count, implementation networks that span a range of disciplines and stakeholders, but all of them with the intention of deploying some kind of fair data or service. And in Go Fair, we try to coordinate those efforts. But now here is an implementation network devoted specifically to virus outbreaks, and now in particular to COVID. Next slide. Yeah, we don't have to go into this in detail, but I just wanted to say that while I was in Atlanta with Christine and Melissa at a conference to advance FAIR in the United States, I had then cobbled together a slide that was really just sort of ad hoc on the fly that showed the current state of my email inbox. These were conversations we were having already with key stakeholders. We called VODAN Fair COVID at the time, so the name changed along the way, but this is a step in the evolution towards trying to think about the deployment of FAIR for the sake of the COVID pandemic. Next slide. And then here, of course, is a snapshot from the Go Fair website. This is the Virus Outbreak Data Network Implementation Network statement. And here you can find links to many other initiatives now being considered by people who are interested in FAIR-related COVID data. So in the next slide, I show that this implementation network is actually composed now of 18 cluster networks. These are subgroups that are interested in specialized areas of FAIR-related COVID data. And you can see at the bottom of the screen, we have now 189 registered observers and contributors. In the next slide. But in addition to the implementation network, we have actually 2 funded projects now in operation under the VODAN implementation network. And the first, that of course, the one that we all know about is the Philips Foundation funded VODAN Africa. But I want to mention also there's a kind of a sister or parallel effort in the Netherlands funded by the ZONMW, that is really attempting exactly the same effort that's happening in Africa, but for Dutch hospitals. So there's this parallel there, and one of my duties is to try and make sure there's adequate coordination between the Dutch effort and also the VODAN Africa effort. In the next slide. This is just to maybe give a little bit more concrete illustration of the main objective in the VODAN project. And this is called a FAIR data point. I label it here FDP. And a FAIR data point is, of course, just setting up a free and open machine actionable metadata platform that contains metadata that in this case, in the VODAN case, will simply announce the existence of an electronic case report form for a COVID-19 patient. Those electronic CRFs can be maintained wherever the stakeholders wish for them to be maintained. So the data can be completely distributed either behind hospitals or elsewhere as the stakeholders would choose to arrange it. And those electronic case reports are, of course, protected by local governance and regulatory systems. But the metadata itself is freely available and is queryable and allows for accurate, real-time, machine actionable reporting of patient data, while at the same time, that data remains in residence with the data owner at all times. So the job that we have now in the VODAN project is to make sure that these FAIR data points are deployed and running as server applications. And then also, I think the more difficult task will be to customize each of these FAIR data points so that we know who the stakeholders are who are running them and what the rules of engagement are for the data that are kept there. In the next slide. The other element here that will be something really, untested, totally new, and it's really, again, I'm so honored to be working with the people that are going to really try this here on the cutting edge. But we will have to go to the local clinical setting, hospital A or hospital B, and with stakeholders on the ground, we will attempt verification processes. So we have to interdict somehow the information flow of the hospital in a trusted, transparent way to make sure that some of that relevant information is captured in the electronic CRF. And so that's a project that, or let's say that's a process that's already underway. And we have, of course, a listing of the stakeholders here who will be hosting these FAIR data points. In the next slide. So sort of the bigger picture here, what we can imagine in, I think even in the next 4 weeks, is perhaps a network of FAIR data points operating in 6 different African countries, and that these FAIR data points will be automatically interoperable, not only between themselves, but between the FAIR data points, as in the next slide, that we might see emerging elsewhere in the world. So at the moment in the Netherlands, as I mentioned, we are working with the Leiden University Medical Center to deploy a VODAN FAIR data point. through another organization called Health RI, who's interested in fair implementation in the Netherlands for medical data. We will be involving, in addition to the Leiden University Medical Center, 7 other university medical centers in the Netherlands. And then we have discussions actually underway right now with additional Dutch hospitals. And so I think what we can expect even in the next, I don't know, 6 months maybe, is that we can look back and say, hey, we have now set up a network of interoperable data exchange for COVID-related disease data and patient data that are spanning continents here. And of course, the field then is wide open for using fair data points to host other kinds of data. So not only patient data or medical data, but for example, viral sequencing data, or even the assay results from laboratories located in the hospitals. All of this can be made available as we'd like to do. And the next slide, I think, is just to say thank you very much for the opportunity to present this today. And I'll be happy to give the floor back to Francesca.
Thank you so much, Eric. Yes, and please, Francesca, if you would please introduce our closing comment speaker and the person who's shown such great leadership throughout this initiative.
Thank you, Christine, and distinguished participants. I would like to introduce the chair of the VODAN Africa Implementation Network and the Vice Chancellor of Kampala International University, Dr. Mohamed Mpeza-Mihigo. We all fondly call him Dr. Mpeza. Dr. Mpeza was educated at Makerere University, Uganda, and the University of Reading, UK, through a science and technology. He's a recipient of several awards, including the Global Education Agency Award, the Islamic Development Bank Award in Leadership Excellency, and the Uganda National Council for Higher Education Recognition Award. He represents Uganda in ISESCO Executive Council with the headquarters in Rabat, Morocco. He has been providing such an inspiring leadership and helping us with our network, bringing in some other higher echelons of universities to join in the VODAN African project. So we're going to be listening to him. In his closing remark, he's going to be demonstrating and talking about the significance of the university's interest in verification and what this Euro-African Partnership Project means for African universities, ministries, and how it brings Africa further into the global map. Dr. Mpeza, sir.
Thank you so much, Professor Francisca. Ladies and gentlemen, a good evening, a good morning, a good afternoon, wherever you are. I know we are in different time zones, which makes this a very unique opportunity. First of all, I would like to take this opportunity to thank Francisca and her team, Professor Miriam, and those who are actually doing the behind the scenes efforts. We are really grateful. I want to thank members and acknowledge a few of the people there. I do acknowledge all of us who are in this webinar this evening or tonight, and hope this discussion today has actually broadened our understanding. I want to recognize, first of all, in our midst, humbly, Jasper Clapwick, and if I've pronounced it wrongly, please do pardon me. You are really most welcome to sit in and discuss. I hope you may have an opportunity to say a word or two before we close. Jasper is a business development manager at the Dutch Development Bank, which is a very critical partner in our efforts, and we are glad that he's around and representing the institution, and we thank Miriam and others who have actually done their best to ensure that we get as many partners as possible. RavoWorks Africa Limited, you've done a great job, you know, in ensuring that you coordinate all of us, remind us, and setting up things. Albert Mulingwa was so excited about your presentation, being somebody who is very critical in the Ministry of Health in the government of Zimbabwe. We do appreciate the sharing you've done. I'm sure other countries can also learn from it. And I think what you highlighted was a very critical issue of the need for us to ensure we work together, we bring everybody on board, and also ensure that the policymakers buy in. Then also the VC of Tunisia University Dissous, you know, Professor Hassan, and also the presenter from Tunisia, Christine Kirkpatrick. Christine, you've been our hero. I'm sure without your San Diego Center of Supercomputing, we would not be able to move. You know, you worked, you know, night and day to ensure that things are done. So we really appreciate, and this is not about politics. You know, sometimes they say the leaders would like to do politics to appease colleagues who work in teams, but this is genuine from the bottom of our hearts. And I'm sure I represent the voices of all these. The other person is Eric Gofair. I think I've picked something very interesting, the need for us to benchmark. The Zone W with the Dutch hospitals is going really to also improve our capacity. I'm sure that is something that the VODAN team will have to look at and also learn from, because it's going to scale up our activities. Dr. Araya, director of the biggest hospital in northern Ethiopia and also University Hospital Makele. We really appreciate. Last week, I enjoyed your presentation and the efforts that you are doing with your colleagues. At the same time, with Dr. Ondimu from the Ministry of Health and the University of Addis Ababa, you know, handling all the COVID data. We think you are a great resource to this network. Allow me also to really acknowledge the colleagues from the medical informatics section and epidemiology of the healthcare and also community health of the University of Leiden and also University of Medicine, Greensford, where we know that you're going to bring expertise for us to be able to learn from and also sharing. I want to say thank colleagues from the science unit, Dr. Reginald Nalugala from Tangaza University, with Professor to thank Mariam Basaja, you know, and your team. You know, we have quite a number of, we have triple Mariams, Miriam, Mariam, and Mariam. So this is really like an interesting triple Mariams who have contributed. No wonder this has brought, you know, the one Mariam from Africa, another one from North Africa, another one from East, and then Europe. So this is great. So I would like to share with you just a snapshot, and I would like to ask Christine to do the needful so that I can, you know, share a few slides with you, and then we're able to go ahead. Thank you so much. That gives you a snapshot of what has been happening. 7th May 2020, there was this big introduction to VODAN and country teams overview. I'm sure at that time it was difficult to, I mean, for very many to appreciate what this would grow into. And then on the 14th of May, you know, there were, you know, we featured the teams from Kenya and Ethiopia. And today we are so glad that we've heard from Tunisia and Zimbabwe. And I think, as I mentioned about Zimbabwe, when you listen to the story of Tunisia and the migratory nature of the communities, you know, that really justifies further the need for this network, because the controls on the borders are really very hard to enforce, and that can actually lead to a resurgence or a reoccurrence of the COVID outbreak or even future pandemics once we have set up our VODAN. Next, please. Okay. Now, what is the crisis? The crisis is really a big one. As we all know, it's global, but I think VODAN, the Virus Outbreak Data Network for Africa, has come up, to pay attention to the African needs. Although, as ably showed by Eric, once our network is well set up, it will definitely link to the global data wherever it will be. And since fair data is being uptaken so quickly, we hope this is going to bring to the front the African perspective. This is really another opportunity. This network and the efforts of everybody in this forum brings out the clarity that, look, it's not only about medical science, it's also about data science. So the value of data, integrating it with medical science for the good of everybody. There are serious fears, there are disruptions of livelihoods, of businesses. I mentioned it, I'm sure we are all glued to our TVs and we know what that means. However, this has also created opportunities, for example, for institutions who are e-learning. This is something that is coming up, collaborations. And you can see from the training of trainers, we are building capacity in order to vent off any possibilities of shutdowns. I'm sure many of our colleagues are experiencing something new. We are also getting new partnerships. I mean, look at the map, the way it was drawn by Eric. You look at those networks that have been established. We have sort of spread to the West Africa, to North East Africa, and Southern Africa. And that really brings out the particular point that we are looking at. Of course, there are opportunities, but also I think it has brought to the forefront the relevance of machine learning and artificial intelligence in whatever we do, and why universities should invest in them. I think this is something that if anybody is left behind in universities without investing both in human capacity and infrastructure, and also going the fair way, then it will be bad, because we cannot be sure of future pandemics. Christine? Thank you. Of course, this is what I'm talking about, why universities are interested. First of all, I think universities will be the first beneficiaries. We know that most universities are really not for profit, and implementing fair principles would be a big advantage. They are the sources of experts. We also know that they are the knowledge makers. They produce the experts. They generate innovations. They also work through collaborations, as is already demonstrated. KIU, Addis Ababa University, Great Zimbabwe, Moi, the one of Nigeria, Tunisia, University de Sousse, Tunisia de Sousse. These are really opportunities for us. So, and I'm sure once other universities in our forum, I discussed a while ago with Professor Miriam, I said we have, for example, in Uganda, we have what we call the Uganda Vice Chancellor's Forum. So we have tried to popularize this. On my part as a Vice Chancellor, I've also been able to inform our National Council for Higher Education, which is the regulator of higher education in this country, that this is going on, so they are aware. We have shared our research that is ongoing, and VODAN is really our #1 big project with the Ministry of Education and Sports. The Ministry of Health is aware. At the East African region, we have what we call the Inter-University Council for East Africa. So I appeal to our partners to also try to popularize this in the forums that regulate or govern or bring together universities, so that as many universities as possible can actually come on board. Yes, next. Yeah, so what is very critical about VODAN? Basically, it's about the issue of ownership and residence. We all know that the conventional data system is really about, sort of migrating data and using a different approach and less of an African initiative. And VODAN Africa is definitely going to ensure that data is owned and handled, at source. And we shall also avoid, within the system, using FAIR, it avoids dictator data removal to warehouses elsewhere. Data is real. The basic principle of FAIR data is about visiting and being able to share, meanwhile leaving it behind without and with permissions, as already stated in the discussions. Next. Yes, so a few special benefits I've already said. Data will not be removed. And secondly, there's going to be continuity of ownership and handling. But what is so important, I think, in the VODAN network is strengthening the data information that is based on, the health system information is based on data that has been collected, that has been gathered, and also patterns developed, like it is going to strengthen ownership. We are training trainers. These are going to train others so that there is guaranteed data stewardship and also tooling. Next, please. Yes, so this is something that we need to look at. The bias need for inclusion of data from Africa. Of course, these are core principles. We are looking at machine readable data from published articles represent in other words, from African perspective, we are less covered. I mean, for example, the machine reading hypothesis on 50,000 articles on COVID, to a lesser extent, includes only 7,000 articles that mention Africa. And most trustworthy data are direct observation data. In other words, one could easily say, really, they are not as fair as we try to do. Together with the Leiden University Medical Center, the network is leading this very big initiative to ensure that it is fair-based direct observation data. And the principles are already known. All of you who are on this network understand the key principles of FAIR. Next, please. So, some of my concluding remarks. I would like to say that this effort is going to really produce a huge resource center, African-based on COVID-19 and probably future pandemics, and outbreaks through the network of FAIR data points. And I think this has been done through the trainings that have taken place, through the webinars. A solution for Africans for Africa will address part of the diversity concerns. We know Africa is really diverse. When you look at Tunisia, I've had the privilege to visit Tunisia, a very beautiful country, like more or less overlooking Europe. So when you get to West Africa, that's also a different one. But even in terms of data and the disease burden and the structures, health systems and so on, this is going to really become a very, it's a melting point, I think. Our network really is a melting point for a very good way forward to deal with issues. The beauty about it is that we are going to strengthen our partnership. And I really are highly indebted to the government, the Dutch government, the Dutch Friends, Philip Foundation, GoFair, and those who are coming on board. We are so grateful. We think this is one of its kind, and it is so timely that our relationship is really mutual and also going to be beneficial for all the communities within Africa and also the partners. Now, the network of FAIR data points is going to help, as I've said, a decreased learning curve during the future pandemics or outbreaks. We think that this data, and I think many people haven't appreciated what is happening now. Many people are focused on livelihood, and survival. But actually, our project is aimed at being very strategic, holding on to the future and ensuring that decision-making is done properly. Socio-economic interventions come on board based on data. This is really the most important thing. Even the health interventions, public health issues and epidemiology strategies have got to come on board based on patterns. And I think the VODAN is going to lay a very, very strong foundation for that. Yes, Christine?
That's the last slide.
Yes. So basically, I really provided this highlight so that we all speak the same language. We are all mapped out and we are all connected. And I think this effort really needs to be applauded. And I want to say we will continue to provide all the support that is needed as Kampala International University, working together with all the partners on board. And I want to sincerely appreciate Professor Miriam, and I think she's on this forum as well, and everybody who has contributed in every bit. I want also to thank my team. The team, Kampala International University, there are quite a number of colleagues who have attended this webinar. I do recognize you. I've seen DVCs on board. I've seen our chief university librarian, which is like the strong room for coordinating. I know it is hosting Francisca and her team, and also trying to integrate VODAN activities with the university activities. All my colleagues who are on this forum, I have recognized you, please. Thank you so much for getting on board and knowing what is happening. Back to you, Francisca, and I think Miriam can't go without saying a word before we close. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir, for such an inspiring presentation. We really appreciate your support and the pledge of further support. Yes, Christine, how would you want to run this? You want to take the questions first, or you want Professor William to say something?
So actually, I would like to suggest something that I think might help us with time and also help us to continue the conversation. So we have several questions this time, and then a number last time that we weren't able to get to. With everyone's permission, I would like to work with Ivy at Ravelworks to pose these questions to the speakers, and then those that can be posted on the VODAN Africa website, you know, things that are not controversial, right? We'll post those publicly. Things that might be a little bit more sensitive, or where the speaker is speaking for themselves and maybe not empowered to speak for an organization, but wants to give us the real story, we will work with them to put those on our Slack channel, which people can join. And we will make sure to communicate with people who ask questions so they know those answers are there. Because there are so many very important questions that I think will even deepen our understanding of how each country's approach differs and give us new ways to look at this. So I hope that that will work for people, and that way we can close before the start of the hour as well. But I think everyone has to agree, this has been very engaging. I have learned so much. I feel a very strong kinship to all of you working on this, and hope to keep helping in any way that I can. Miriam, would you like to give some quick thought?
Yeah, maybe just to round up the roundup. This was an amazing session. I think it was really very interesting to have this work that we do in VODAN so deeply rooted in the realities and in the very specific circumstances as they were shown today, from the very south of the continent to the very north, and then again so close to Europe. So I'd just like to say to everybody, thanks for being here, taking a lot of time out. It was really, really very interesting. Thank you to the presenters. Thank you to Ivy again, to Francesca, who did a lot of preparations and is all the time on the ball. I'm just so proud of you, Professor Francesca. You're doing an amazing job. And Christine, we don't want to lose you. So at the end of this webinar, we really thank you for everything that you've done to give this platform and this connection. And we hope to see you back and very often in VODAN Africa. Thank you so much, Christine. And thank
yes,
you to
of
everyone.
course.
And I leave.
Yeah, Christine, would we allow Jasper a minute just to say hello?
Of course. Yes, of course, please.
Yeah, so now you're really putting me on the spot. Thank you. Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, everybody. Contrary to what you see, the hairdresser started working again a week ago in the Netherlands, but I haven't been able to go yet. So, but all joking aside, so I work for the Dutch Development Bank. I'm working with Professor Miriam and with Maarten and Christine right now of Coordate to support phase 2 of the VODAN initiative. So getting the GoFair data points up and running in Mozambique, Ethiopia, and Uganda, if I'm not mistaken, and also, of course, forming
Zimbabwe,
Sorry.
Ethiopia, and Uganda. But we also want Mozambique in, that is true.
Now, I heard some other countries being mentioned already at the beginning of the call, so I'm grateful for that. I'm also grateful scrolling through all the names that I see a lot of African names, because as I said, being said a couple of times, it really is an African initiative for the Africans. So I'm honored to be involved. For us as a development bank, it's absolutely crucial that we set it up now, of course, for COVID. But past COVID, that it will continue and it will also serve its purpose. Our office is actually right next to ZOM MW, as was mentioned earlier, although where offices are these days is not very relevant. But again, very much thank you thank you for the invitation to be there. I really hope to be able to meet most, if not all of you in person. So, Asante Sana, thank you.
Karibu, karibu. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So just,
Yes. Yeah.
oh yes, please.
No, go ahead. Go ahead. I really wanted to thank him, thank everybody again for their time.
Yes, thank you. So with that, we will reluctantly, I know I have enjoyed hearing the voice of all of you and seeing the face of you in my home. And thank you so much for all of the stories that have been shared, all of the approaches, people who shared their challenges, as well as the things that are working. And know there are so many people here who are even more strongly connected than before. Thank you, VODAN Africa, for making this possible, and for all of the supporters as well. So we will close out this call, and we will notify you as we get these questions and answers together. Thank you, everyone, and stay well.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you, sir.
Bye. Bye.
Bye, sir. Thank you.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you.
Bye, everyone. Thank you. See you guys next time. Gustin, bye.